All right. So I got 120. We good?
Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. A couple of disclaimers before we get started. First thing is that it's Ed Kless, not Edward Kless. Only my mom calls me Edward, and it's only when she's mad at me. So we'll just go with Ed. If you've got any interaction with me, let me know. Ed Kless will be fine. Second thing, unfortunately, not the title is correct, Asking Effective Questions. Actually, that's been moved to now the subtitle, Asking Effective Questions. The title of the presentation is actually Shut Up and Eat Your French Fries. So we'll talk about why that is in just a second. So that's the title, but Asking Effective Questions. But if you read the description, like anybody reads the description, if you read the description somehow is incorrect. So it does not reflect what I'm going to talk about. I'm not quite sure where the slip up was. So let me tell you what I'm going to talk about, and then you can make a decision, because if you'd rather go see my friend David in the next room, which I'm totally cool with, he does a great presentation as Inspector Gadget, all in favor. So what I'm going to, this session is dedicated to the possibility that professionals can become more effective in their work if they learn how to ask better and deeper questions. This is not easy to do. This is not easy to do. This is hard work. And the reason it's hard work is because we have a lot of preconceived notions about the questions that we're supposed to ask, the language that we're supposed to use in our profession. And we need to think differently than we have in the past if we want to get better at asking questions. So it's hard work, and it's not for everybody. I'm definitely an acquired taste. I like to think of myself as Scotch, right? I'm an acquired taste. I've scientifically proven, based on previous evaluations, that 1 out of 20 people think I'm full of crap. And I'm totally at peace with that. I'm good with that. And I'm also at peace that as a presenter, my ultimate goal really is to get one of you to think a little bit differently than you did when you came in here. That's it. It's a really low bar, right? So all I got to do is get one of you to think a little bit differently than when you walked into this room, and I feel as my job as a presenter is complete. So you can evaluate me however you want based on that, but I'm just telling you. I'm also, because of that, by the way, there's more than 20 of you in the room. So there's more than 20 of you in the room. Because of that, it is statistically likely that one of you will think that I'm full of crap. And I'm really at peace if you want to leave at any point in time. I'm not going to be offended by it. In fact, please don't stay. Really, please don't, because I don't want to waste your time. Right? And if it would be, and I would feel really bad if you stayed because you felt out of some, like, I got to be polite to the guy. You don't have to be, I'm originally from New York. There's really not a lot you can do to offend me. Getting up and leaving is not one of the things that will offend me in any way. Okay? So I'm good with that. All right. So, dedicated to the possibility that if we get better at asking questions, we can be better at what we do. We can help our customers more. Yes, you heard me, I said customer, not client. We'll probably talk a little bit about that at some point during the presentation today, why I suggest you use the word customer and not client. And I know that's already gotten you like kind of freaking out about it. But this session is a lot about language. It's a lot about understanding language and the importance sometimes of minor changes and shifts in language that can have a significant impact on what it is that we do, right? And some people don't buy into this, so we're good with that. I'm gonna start by playing you an edited video that was the inspiration for this session. Well, there's a couple of inspirations, but this was one of the inspirations for it. And to let you know, I have 2 versions of this. This is the United States version. I was in Canada last week and I played the Canadian version. The Canadian version has the cuss words in it. This one hasn't bleeped out because like we're much more prude here in the United States, so you're gonna hear a lot of beeps. but you can pretty much figure it out. I was freaking the sound guys out earlier because they were all like, "What's the beeping going on in the room?" It's okay, I was just testing the video. Right. But this is one of the inspirations for this. I'm sure many of you have seen this guy, Louis C.K. And I was like, okay, yeah, now you know why there's going to be beeps. Unless he's on Conan, and then you can watch the ones on Conan. They're suitable for work. But this one's not suitable for work if you find the original version. But it was one of the inspirations for it, and I'll explain why in just a second. But first, let's take a look at the Louis C.K. video.
Here's the thing. I never judge other parents now. I never do. I used to, but I never do. Like, you know when you see a mother in McDonald's or someplace or in a toy store and she's just melting down on her kid? She's like, "Shut up. I hate you. You're ugly." And people are standing around going, "Oh my goodness, she's a horrible mother." Well, guess what? Those people aren't parents. They don't have kids. Because any parents who are in that store are thinking, what did that kid do to that poor woman? That poor woman. I wish I could help. Because you don't know, man. You don't know. Or like when you see a parent that seems to be negligent, like you see a parent in McDonald's with the kid, and the parent's like, "I can't take this anymore," and just like collapsed, and all the shopping bags are just strewn everywhere. And the kid's happy. The kid's eating French fries. And the kid asks a question like, "Mama, why is the sky blue?" And she's like, "Just shut up and eat your French fries." And you think, what a terrible mother. Why doesn't she answer her child? When I have a child, I will answer all of their questions and open their minds to the wonders of the world. Well, guess what? You don't know what you're talking about. You can't answer a kid's question. They don't accept any answer. A kid never goes, "Oh, thanks, I get it." They never say that. They just keep coming. More questions. Why? Until you don't even know who you are anymore at the end of the conversation. It's an insane deconstruction. It's amazing. This is my daughter the other day. She's like, "Papa, why can't we go outside?" "Well, because it's raining." "Why?" "Well, water's coming out of the sky." "Why?" "Because it was in a cloud." "Why?" "Well, clouds form when there's vapor." "Why?" "I don't know. I don't know. I don't know any more things. Those are all the things I know." "Why?" "Because I'm stupid, okay? I'm stupid." "Why?" "Well, because I didn't pay attention in school, okay? I went to school, but I didn't listen in class." "Why?" "Because I was high all the time. I smoked too much pot." "Why?" "Because my parents gave me no guidance. They didn't give a shit." "Why?" "Because in a car and had me, and they resented me for taking their youth." "Why?" "Because they had bad morals. They just had no compass." "Why?" "Because they parents. It just keeps going like that." "Why?" "Because we're alone in the universe. Nobody gives a about us." I'm going to stop here to be polite to you for a second. But this goes on for hours and hours, and it gets so weird and abstract at the end. It's like, why? Well, because some things are and some things are not. Why? Well, because things that are not can't be. Why? Because then nothing wouldn't be. You can't have nothing isn't. Everything is. Why? Because if nothing wasn't, there'd be we don't like giant ants with top hats dancing around. There's no room for all that shit. Why? I'll eat your French fries, you little. Thank you very much, everybody. Good night. Thank you very much, everybody.
So, now, what was the inspiration for this video, and actually one of my colleagues, Aaron, is in the room, is that in business, like, it's only, forget about going like 12 times in. If you ask why more than twice in a business meeting, you get told to shut up and eat your French fries, don't you? Right? and Aaron, you can say, yes, I've been in meetings with Ed where he's asked why several times, and somebody usually says,
the one that told me to eat my french
yeah,
fries.
you're right, exactly. So shut up and eat your french fries, right? So I've come to understand that I actually resent getting told to shut up and eat my french fries as an adult. But it's true. But let's examine this for a second. This is why do kids ask so many questions, and why do they stop? This is a question that is interesting to me. I mean, this is research that says question asking as human beings peaks at about 4, right? The time of the Louis C.K. video, right? Why? And then it goes down from there. And I guess it's because we learn how to read, and we learn how to write, and we learn how to do other things. So that's part of it. But I think that this quote is also very true as well, and that is we enter school as question marks, but we leave as periods. We leave, this is all your knowledge, period. Here's your diploma, period. And don't ask a lot of questions anymore. Fill out your timesheet, and that's what you need to do. Okay? Period. End of story. But I think what we're finding is that today, in today's world, we need to get better at asking questions. And we need to resurrect this art of asking questions. Because it's lost somewhat, this idea of rhetoric. So I'm going to examine that with you the rest of our time today. Right? Examine this lost art of question asking. What are good questions? How can we get better at it? What are the things that we can do? What are some examples of bad questions? What are some examples of good questions? How can we construct better questions? And then I'm going to set you free and go out and go forth and ask better questions. That's kind of the thought. So the other inspiration for this is a book I want to share with you, and here's the quote from the book. It's called A More Beautiful Question by Warren Burger, not the Supreme Court Justice, different guy. Okay, for those of you old enough to remember the Burger Court, this is a different dude. But it's called A More Beautiful Question, which is based on an E.E. Cummings poem, which is to those who get a more beautiful answer requires a more beautiful question. Right? So I think there's something telling in that poetry too. A more beautiful answer requires a more beautiful question. But he says this, he says, great products, companies, even industries often begin with a question. Yet few companies actually encourage questioning in any substantive way. There are no departments or training programs focused on questioning, no policies, guidelines, best practices. On the contrary, many companies, whether consciously or not, have established cultures that tend to discourage inquiry. In the form of someone's asking, for example, why are we doing this particular thing in this particular way? So sometimes even asking why the first time is frowned upon. You know, we get the classic example that most of us talk about in business as well, because we've always done it that way. Right? When many of us, I'm sure, have seen that. Right? One of the courses that I teach is in business process design, and one of the examples that I often give is the process that I encountered, and I'm almost certain there's more than you hear that somebody else besides me will have seen this in your career. Did you ever see a business process which required, hands up if you ever seen the business process in an organization that required the photocopying of cash as a backup? Anybody seen that? Okay, look, 1, 2, 3. See this? I want you to think about that for a second. Right? We got to photocopy cash and fan out the serial numbers, put the change up there, make a copy and staple it to the invoice as if that's going to prove something. Right? It's completely absurd. Right? The breakdown, by the way, if you want to do this with your friends, is about 12 people in a room. If you have 12 people in a room, accountants like ours, if you have 12 people, somebody has seen photocopying cash besides you. So that's like so if you want everyone to use that, you gotta have 12 people. So nobody asked this question, so why are we doing this? I'm gonna just photocopy cash. We've always done it this way, right? So we see this over and over again. And what here I think is interesting is as business people, we often we'll even make fun of our customers who do this. Like, this is so silly. But then when we look at our own processes inside our own organizations, we find the stuff that we do to be completely rational. Right? Completely rational all the time. Here's my quick one. It always works. Okay, how many of you have ever filled out a timesheet? Ever? Hands up if you filled out. Hands up. Keep them up. Loud and proud. Hands up if you filled out a timesheet. Okay. How many of you have ever not exactly told the truth on a timesheet?
Not yours. Oh, please.
Whether up or down. Right? Too much or too little. But we got to do this every day. Because, you know why? Why do we need these timesheets? Yeah, but also, so, because even if pricing is a different class of mine, but even if we get past that, why do we still need timesheets?
Always have. We've always done this.
We've always done it. We need to know what our costs are. Well, we just demonstrated that that's bullshit. Please stop saying that it's actual cost, because nobody puts down on the timesheet what actually happened. You put down what you think should have happened. Laughter's a confession. Right? That's what you put down on the timesheet. But then somebody else is after going, oh, well, we need that because we need to go back and look to see what actually happened. Really?
Allegedly.
Good luck with that, dude. Right? So these are the questions we laugh at others, but we don't laugh at ourselves. We see ourselves do interesting things. One of the best examples of this, and an institution, an organization that totally understands questioning coming from customers, is Disney. Right? First of all, Disney doesn't have customers. What do they have? Guests, capital G guests, and they don't have staff or team members. What does Disney have? What? Cast members. Right? Everyone who works for Disney is a cast member. Everyone who comes to Disney is a guest. Capital G, capital C, cast member across the board. Okay. Top 3 questions asked at Disney parks. Number 1. Where's the bathroom? Number 1 question. Where's the bathroom? Second question. What's the second most often asked question? Where's Mickey Mouse or some character? Right. That's the second most asked question. Third most asked question at Disney.
Where's a cheap place to eat?
Good place to eat? No.
Cheap place to eat.
Cheap place to eat? None. There are none. 0. What time is the 5 o'clock parade? Third most often asked question at Disney. But you laugh, but here's what Disney as a cultural institution has figured out. When you as a capital G guest walks into a Disney and asks, what time is the 5 o'clock parade? What do you actually mean? Is this a good spot? When will the parade be coming by the spot that I currently happen to be in? Right? So it's completely contextual. But the only way that we can figure out the way to ask the question is to ask what time is the 5 o'clock parade? Right? Now, Disney characters, cast members, do not laugh when their capital G guests ask this question. Because they figured out that it really is something, that the person is asking something else. Right? It's a different question. That's the only way to actually express it. And I submit to you is that your organization has a 5 o'clock parade question that you get from your customers, and you probably laugh at them, or at least sneer, or put yourself on mute so that you can laugh for a second. Right? And instead, what you should be doing is figuring out what's our 5 o'clock parade question. What's our 5 o'clock parade question, and what does it really mean? What does it really mean? What's that question that people ask us all the time? It sounds like a stupid question to you, but really has some deeper meaning. And I think every organization has one. Every single organization has one. So that would be something I would try to figure out. What's your 5 o'clock parade question? All right. Why are questions so important? There's this guy. If you want to do some really interesting reading, download a copy on Amazon of Eric Hoffer's book. There's a bunch of them, but just get like his famous quotations of Eric Hoffer. Eric Hoffer was a self-taught philosopher who was a longshoreman at the port of San Francisco in the 50s and 60s, and then taught himself philosophy, and has a lot of brilliant things to say. But this is one of his more brilliant things, and I love this. Language was invented to ask questions. Answers may be given in grunts and gestures, but questions must be spoken. Humanness came of age when man asked the first question. I love this part. Think about the political landscape today. Social stagnation results not from the lack of answers, but from the absence of the impulse to ask questions. And I submit to you that most of our problems that we're experiencing, both in our businesses and perhaps as a species, and certainly as a country, is because we're asking ourselves the same questions over and over and over again, and we're not seeking out better questions. Can you imagine if a politician came out and said, I don't have any answers, but I've got some better questions? How would that work? I don't have any answers, but I've got better questions. I'd vote for that person in a heartbeat, because I think that's our problem. I think we tend to ask ourselves the same question over and over and over again. We need new questions. We ask ourselves the same questions in our organizations over and over and over again. And I'll explain that as well. Okay, so Eric Hoffer, brilliant, brilliant guy. Why are these questions so important? Well, because questions determine a lot of different things, right? Questions determine the quality of our experience. Have you ever, and let me rephrase my question. And I think this is a really good question, by the way. I want you to think this is going to take probably 30 seconds at least, but maybe longer. When was the last time that you personally experienced, great listening? Not when did you listen well, but when was the last time that you can recall being really listened to by someone? Probably hard to even think of a time. You might be able to, but it's probably hard to even think of one. I submit that those of you who do or can think of a time will probably reflect on the conversation and find out that the reason why it was you felt well listened to is because the person was asking you really good questions. They weren't just reading from a script or a checklist. They really were trying to get an understanding of you or what your situation was or whatever, right? So I'm always on the lookout for experiencing good listening. I enjoy it when people listen well, mostly because I like to talk a lot. That's why I have to speak. All right. How well we understand others, right? Our questions determine how well we can understand what other people are talking about, because if we get better at asking questions, we're going to get more and more insight into what the other person is thinking and feeling and believing, right? Because really it's about beliefs, isn't it? Ultimately it's about beliefs. All of us human beings, no one here but us humans, but we behave mostly because of what we believe, not what we know. Let me say that again. We behave mostly out of what we believe, not mostly what we know. Now this is a very difficult example of it, but it really cuts to the heart of things, and I hope I don't offend anybody with this. But nobody flies planes into buildings because of what they know, right? It's what they believe. They didn't know how to fly the plane, right? It wasn't a question of knowledge. That's a negative example. And I think that all businesses, as business people, we behave mostly because of what we believe and not purely out of what we know. How we relate to the rest of the world. Our questions are the best indication to others how we relate to the world. If we're a person who's constantly asking questions, we have a lot of curiosity, that says an awful lot about us. to other people. If we tend to be a KIA, as my dad used to call it, KIA, know-it-all, you tend not to ask questions. Just do a lot of talking, right? And as the Wizard of Oz once said, I don't know, some people without brains do an awful lot of talking, right? What's important and what is not? I mean, think about it. Without questions, there would be no way to prioritize anything. Without questioning, we could never set a priority. At best, if we just had grunts and gestures, we could indicate preference, like you're a dog and the popcorn bowl when you're watching a movie, right? Dog looks at you, looks at the popcorn bowl, looks at you, looks at the popcorn bowl. The dog's not asking, can I have popcorn? But clearly the dog is indicating a preference, yes? Right? But we couldn't prioritize things, right? We would only indicate preference. And lastly, our course of actions and direct the actions of others. One of the exercises that I've done in conjunction with doing this presentation in smaller groups, let me just quickly describe it for you, because I think there's some good insight, but we don't really have time today to break up and do it. I strongly encourage you, by the way, as I describe this exercise, if you want to write this down, do this back at your office. It's a fascinating exercise. You need everyone, as Yogi Berra, the great American philosopher, said, you need everyone to pair off in threes. All right? Everybody's got to pair off in threes. And then each person in this little triad is going to be one of three positions in a conversation. The first position is called the observant position. And the person in the observant position just watches the other two people. That's all they do. Right? The second position is what's called receptive. Right? This is the person who is asking questions. And here's the key to receptive. The receptive person is only allowed to ask questions. They're not allowed to make any statements at all. And then the third person in this little triad is in the active mode. And this active person is telling a story. And usually what I do is I say, okay, here's the story you're going to tell. Something about your life. Anything. Do you all know about you? Yes. Okay, good. Can you talk about yourself for 2 minutes? Yes. Maybe your experience coming here or whatever it was. Doesn't matter. Just talk for 2 minutes about something. But you can't ask questions. You're only allowed to make statements. Now, one of the fundamental learnings of this, or actually a couple, but the two most obvious that people report back to me is one, they hate being the observer, right? They hate being in the observant mode because they want to either be active, but mostly because they think, boy, that person who was asking questions was asking really stupid questions. I wouldn't have asked that question. And then the second report back is this, that the person who is asking the questions was actually the one in control over the conversation. Not the person who is, quote, active, but the person receptive. Because what? They were asking the questions. So somebody might be telling a story about their experience flying here on a plane, and then you ask a question, well, what was your check-in experience like at the airport? And then you go down a different path as the person who's active. And they're really then in control. And I think this is important insight for us as professionals to understand is that it's not about giving answers. Being a professional is not about giving answers. It's primarily about being able to ask better questions. Right? But yet we think, oh, well, if a customer has an answer, has a question, we must answer it. And I'm going to talk about why that isn't always necessarily the best thing to do is answer the question. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Okay. We're about, 20, 30 minutes in or so. Just want to check, everybody okay?
Yeah.
Let's go in a good direction.
Yep.
All right. If it's not, it's okay. You can leave. I'm almost. I'm gonna go over here. Yeah, we're about 30 minutes in. Okay. But seriously, as we move on, if your mind is like hurting, you can go at any point. All right. What is an effective question? Well, I think there are three aspects of it. One, that they have valued answers, right? An effective question will have a valuable answer, and that's back to the E.E. Cummings quote, a more beautiful answer requires a more beautiful question, right? So it has to be a question that is going to have a valuable answer. A question actually has a purpose or intent behind it, right? What's the intent? So it's not just the question, there's actually an intention behind the question. And important point here, intent counts more than technique. I'm gonna share some techniques with you in just a little bit, but your intention counts more than your technique. In other words, you can screw this up. You can screw up asking the question the right way, as long as your intention is pure, right? As long as what's behind your question is what's important, right? So your intent or purpose is way more important than the technique you actually use. And then lastly, are effectively delivered, right? And we'll talk a little bit what I mean by effectively delivered in just a bit. Okay. Now, I want to give you some examples of poor questions, some questions that are not really good questions. And this is, remember, laughter is a confession. Right? So when you hear some of these, because by the way, guilty is charged on probably all of these at some point, right? Guilty is charged on all of these. Manipulate. Questions that manipulate. Questions like, you know your boss really wants this done. You know that, right? That's a manipulative question. Right? You know your boss wants this done. Gain power, which is similar. Are you with us? Are you with us? This is going back to the Bush administration. You're not for us, you're against us, right? Are you with us? You're with us, right? Clearly a manipulative question. Because the response is not, no, I'm not with you yet. No, that's not an acceptable answer to that question. Intimidate this. Intimidate you. Do you think that you can get fired because of this? Laughter's a confession. Boast. Boasting questions. I hear people in sales roles do this all of the time. Now, this is the exaggeration, and then I'll give you an actual example of what you will hear. Boastful questions. Well, enough about me. What do you think of me? Now, we laugh, but how many times have you heard someone in a sales position say, demo, or whatever, and shows us to say, what do you think of that system, huh? Right? What do you think of that? Ta-da! Right, so boastful questions. Confuse and also contain jargon. These kind of go hand in glove sometimes. Right? Confusion. If you're asking the accounts payable person or some clerk in an organization, what's your fiduciary responsibility here? Right? Jargon. I'm sure has your company understood or gone through a strategic implementation trying to understand that your CRM strategy, that it ensures future pull? What? Sounds mad, right? Well, I don't future pull. I just made that up. What even is that? All right. Make yourself look bad. And this one, we all have to watch out for. This is probably the one that we all are guilty to some extent in this one, where you say, can I be honest with you? What does that, if you just ask that question, what does that now mean about everything you said prior to that? Right? Can I be honest with you? No, lie to me, I prefer it. What does that mean? Right? But and any form of that. Can I be frank? Right? Can I tell you what I really think? Right? These are all prefaces to, hey, because what I told you was not what I really thought. Right? And then this one we're going to spend a little bit of time on. This is where these questions ask how too early. Questions that ask how too early are bad questions, not because the questions in and of themselves are bad, but because sometimes when these questions are asked too early in the process, they cause problems. So I'm going to take you through a bunch of these. This is from a book by Peter Block called The Answer to How is Yes. Sorry, that is terrible. I'll have to read some of this to you. That doesn't translate always that well. But let's talk about these questions over here in the green, and I'll read them off. He says, these are the 6 questions. These 6, I love it. These 6 questions that we talk about in business 90+% of the time. There's only 6 questions that we concern ourselves with in business. Only 6. They're just variations on these 6. How do you do it? How long will it take? How much does it cost? How do you get those people to change? How do you measure it? And how have other people done it successfully? Because most of our conversations, 90+% of our conversations, are about these 6 questions. Now, the it changes from industry to industry, or company to company, or customer to customer, right? That's going to change, or even person to person, so the it's going to change. But the format of the question doesn't change all that much, so we just substitute in a new it, right? And the other one that doesn't have an it is those people. Yep. By the way, just a side note here, you can always tell that there's going to be a challenge when people start using collective nouns. Collective nouns. Those people. How do we get those people to change? Right? Have you ever heard this one? Oh, sales just doesn't get it. Sales. Sales, like all of sales? Right? Collective nouns. You hear in politics all the time. Washington said this. Really? The entire city of Washington stood up and said this? You know, the administration, right? So anytime we hear collective nouns with things that are attributed, we know there's going to be a challenge. So watch out for collective nouns as well. All right, so Block says, look, these are questions, these how questions. He says these are good questions. There's nothing inherently wrong with these questions. There's nothing evil about these questions. They're not bad in and of themselves. What he says is the problem is that they are often ill-timed. He says they are often asked too early in the process. That's the problem with these questions. They are asked too early in the process. He says the reason why we ask these questions, by the way, is because these are human defense mechanisms against change. Right? If you don't want to change, if you have no desire to change, you ask a bunch of how questions about a proposal that somebody's making. Oh yeah, how are you going to do that? How much is that going to cost? How long is it going to take? So you see, actually even sound smart in meetings. Listen to him, he's asking all these great questions. Right? And they are good questions. There's nothing wrong in, like I said, per se, the questions. The problem is that they're asked too early in the process. Let me give you an example of one that I think is really bad in business, and that is, how have other people done it successfully? Right? There's like, and I hate this sometimes, you know, is there anybody doing benchmarking here? It's usually like a court, there's a session on benchmarking. This is the ultimate, how have other people done this, doing this, right? Benchmarking. And, you know, and I really have a problem with benchmarking because I find people coming out of benchmarking sessions only have two comments. Either they say, A, I wasn't as bad as I thought I was. So they're like, okay, good. Or they're like, I don't know if that data was right. Right? Those are the only two reactions to benchmarking sessions. Either I didn't suck as much as I thought I did, or I'm not going to do anything because the data that they were presenting, I don't think that was really all that right. It really wasn't pertaining to exactly what I'm talking about. Right? So like, why did you go to the benchmarking session? All right, but this is the problem with this one. Think about this. How have other people done this successfully? If this question gets asked too early in the process, it is not possible to innovate. You kill and stifle all innovation in the cradle by asking this question. The quickest way to kill any innovative thought in your organization is to ask, well, how have other people done this successfully? Because what if the answer is, they haven't? All right, think about Wilbur and Orville Wright on the way from Dayton, Ohio to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Well, Wilbur, how have other people done this powered man flight thing successfully? I don't know, Orville. In fact, I was doing some research in the Dayton library, and I found that no one's been able to do it. You know, there's this guy, Icarus, back in the Greeks, you know, he had the wax and the wings and crashed into the river, it didn't work out well. Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, perhaps the smartest man ever to have lived, invented no less than 4 flying machines, 4 of them. But people have built them and they don't get off the ground. Well, actually, one of them gets off the ground, the heliocopter, but it really just pops until it crashes and breaks itself apart. You're right, Wilbur, the hell with it, let's go back to the bicycle shop. Right? So this is the danger in these how questions. It's not that they're not good questions, it's that they are often, and I think way often, ill-timed. Think about this one. How long will this take? There is no good answer to that question. When somebody asks, so how long is this going to take? And it's sometimes asked this way. How long is this going to take to implement? Because we got to use fancy words. How long is this going to take to implement? Right? If you're asking that question, can't you reject any answer? Well, it's going to take 3 months. Whew, that's too long. Or 3 months. Too short. No way. We can't adjust fast enough. Right? So I can reject any, it doesn't matter what the answer is. Isn't that great? It's a great question because it doesn't matter what your answer is, I can reject it. Right? And that's the thing about these how questions, is that they oftentimes can just be any answer can be rejected out of hand. Right? How do you do it? Or how does your system do it? Or how do you suggest we do it? Right? How do you do it? Well, I think you should do this. That won't work here. You ever do that? That won't work here. You don't know my customers. You don't know my boss. You know my team members. Here's a litany of excuses. Right? How do you do that? Won't matter. And of course, the one, unfortunately, that too many of us are obsessed with is this one. How do you measure it? How do you measure it? You ever hear this phrase? What you can measure, you can manage. Ever hear that? I'm sure you have. Yes, of course. How many of you think Peter Drucker said that? Hands up. Good, because he never said it. Yet if you search on that phrase, by the way, on the internet, you will see endless sets of quotations attributing that to Peter Drucker. What you can measure, you can manage. Or sometimes in the inverse, what you can't measure, you can't manage. Right? But he didn't say that. Now, the closest thing he said was something like this. What you measure, you will get. That's different. Right? What you measure, you will get. But that you can get it by gaming the system, can't you? Might not be the actual behavior you want, but you get it. Right? What you measure, you will get. But this is the important question, and I'm going to read these out. What Block says is, look, too early. Let's ask and answer these questions first. So instead of, how do you do it, what I really should be asking myself is, what refusal have I been postponing? Now this one's confusing, so I'm going to take you through this one a little bit. What refusal have I been postponing? I had a boss. And this boss was an idea fountain. This guy spewed ideas. I mean, he just like exploded with ideas constantly. Really smart guy. And 90% of his ideas were pretty good. 90%. But 10% of them were dumb. I mean, like dumb ideas. Right? So when he would ask me to do something, most of the time, 90% of the time, I was like, okay, yes, no problem. But then there was this 10% of the time he'd ask me to do something and I'm like, that's stupid. Now, can you say that's stupid to your boss? No. So what do? We don't say no, we postpone a refusal. We postpone saying no. See what I mean? We don't say no, we postpone saying no. So then when he would ask me, 2 weeks later, so Ed, where's the that I asked you about? What did I say? I was just about to get to it. Next thing on my list. So I procrastinated. Now, what I found with this guy, though, is that in both cases, 30% of the time he wouldn't remember asking me. So it was an effective strategy to just ignore him twice, actually. Because it ended up being that only like 9% of the time, just 30% of 30, when I actually had to do something that I thought was stupid. It was actually a successful strategy. Right? Because I could just ignore him twice. I knew when he asked me the third time, I better do this. Must be a real reason. But we all do it. We all postpone saying no. Because in business, we're not allowed to say no, culturally, if our boss asks us to do something. Now, unless it's illegal or immoral, and even then, see Enron. Right? See WorldCom. Lots of examples of where they did it anyway. All right. So what refusal have been by postponing? In other words, what is it that I know I need to do that I keep saying no to? I don't want to do that now. Maybe later. Maybe later. What do I postpone? That make sense? Okay. So that one is probably the most difficult one. A couple more quick ones on this. How do you get those people to change? Here, by the way, is you know that you've really arrived, I think, as a leader, is when you begin to transform this question on your own. And instead of saying, how are you going to get those people to change, or how do I get those people to change, you ask this: what is my contribution to the problem? Right? What is my contribution to the problem? And then this one, instead of how do you measure it, really the question is, what is the judgment I need to make? You know, all measurements are actually judgments in disguise. All measurements are judgments in disguise. In other words, you're selecting what is it you measure. You're making a judgment about what to measure. And it's relative. How fast am I moving? Standing right here. How fast am I moving?
Not at all. No.
Not at all. 0 miles an hour. Except, of course, if you were to look at me from a point north of the North Pole, in which case you'd see that the Earth is going around at about 1,000 miles an hour, right? Of course, further north of the solar system, you see that the Earth is going around the sun 16,000 miles an hour, right? And then, of course, you know, north of we'll see the whole entire Milky Way galaxy is rotating around the center of the Milky Way galaxy at about 120,000 miles an hour. Ooh, I'm tired. Ooh. This is Einstein's theory of relativity, right? But we're applying it. In other words, the measurement is relative. The measurement is relative. Relative to what? Right? Relative to what? That's the important thing. So all measurements are actually judgments in disguise, and I think what we do is, instead of making good judgments on stuff, instead of limiting the number of things that we measure, we just measure everything. Well, how's that working out for you? That's the Dr. Phil question. How's that working out for you? 17 key performance indicators. How many key performance indicators do you have when you have 17 key performance indicators? 0. You have 0 key performance indicators. Right? Balanced scorecard. We have 5 different metrics in each of the 4 quadrants. 20 metrics that we look at on a regular basis. Right. Right? This becomes the challenge. If I had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended on it, I would use the first 55 minutes determining the proper questions to ask. Such a good slide, isn't it? Unfortunately, like the Drucker quote that I shared with you about, Einstein didn't say this, but it's a really good quote. Right? Now, he's attributed, we think he said it or something like it, but nobody can actually find where he said it actually. It's still a good quote. And at least it's certainly in the spirit of what it is that we're talking about today. Okay, let's talk about setting up. How do you set up questions? How do you set up questions? The first thing that you want to do in a great question is make sure that you're creating a distinction from the past. Creating a distinction from the past. Then we need to give permission for unpopular answers. It's okay to not agree. Nextly, we want to replace advice with curiosity. Get into a mode of being that's more curious than one where you're trying to impart advice on people. And then lastly, think about what's called the risk order. This is an advanced topic, and actually there's probably a day-long course on just these 3 bullets someday. We have questions of possibility and dissent coming earlier, and then later we need questions of ownership, commitment, and gifts. And I hand to God, this was not my intent. But the fact that the description was not in the catalog allowed me actually to do this with you in my preamble description. So this session is dedicated to the possibility. I'm creating a future that is distinct from the past. This session is dedicated to the possibility that professionals who ask more effective questions will be more helpful to their customers. Said, doing this is hard work and not for everybody. If you want to leave, it's okay. Because we have to think differently than we have in the past. Right? So mostly this session is only here. We're not having to talk about ownership, commitment, and gifts. That'll just be if you actually take something from this course and bring it forward. I did mention it a little bit at the end. But hopefully you're going to take this forward and move on and ask better questions and encourage other people to ask better questions. All right, so those are the setup for more effective questions. What do great questions do? And this word is probably going to, I shouldn't say probably, this word will make some of you uncomfortable in a business context. Great questions engage people in an intimate way. Intimate way. Very personal, very connected, very emotional. And this is a side note, but you probably have seen this other places. You know, most of the accounting function is going to be replaced by a bot in the next 5 to 10 years. You get that, right? I mean, you get that. If there's a checklist, if you've got a checklist, we could probably teach a computer to do it better or faster. Over time. Not immediate. You don't have to go worry about this tomorrow. Right? But here's the really cool part, is that our ability to engage with people in an intimate way, in other words, what we called back in B school the soft stuff, that's going to become even more important. Even more important in the future, because the bots will do the other stuff. Right? And if you think I'm kidding, look, do some YouTube searches on IBM Watson, right? Which is now already doing discovery in major legal cases, is already diagnosing cancer for the Mayo Clinic better than doctors. Fortunately, accounting doesn't usually kill people, so therefore it's low on the list of what we're going to use Watson for, so you got a little time. But eventually it's going to get there. Right? So those of you that can make the shift to be more intimate, you'll be able to survive in the coming future. Great questions confront people with their freedom to make a choice. And if I love that, this is one of my favorite definitions of the word leadership, by the way. Great leaders confront people with their freedom to make a choice. You are free to choose. There's no such thing as, and this is how it's, going back to a slide, how do we get those people to be more accountable? Have you heard that? Have you heard that in any business? How do we get these people? How do we get those people or these people to be more accountable? Right? That's a big conversation. Let me a little secret for you. You don't. Accountability is always chosen, not imposed. Compliance can be imposed. So if you're just shooting for compliance, hey, maybe that's what you want to do, great. But that's not people being accountable. They'll be compliant. There's a difference between compliance and accountability. If you want people to be accountable, you give them their freedom. And when I say freedom, here's an example of what one business in Brazil is doing, Ricardo Semler at Semco. Every new employee in the company gets an American Express card and is told, if you need to purchase anything to make your job better or easier, do so on this card. Ready? And this is when some of you turn to jelly. And we don't audit it at all. We trust you. You wouldn't have been hired if we don't trust you. So if you need something to do your job better, make it happen. We trust you. Okay? That is people then choosing to be accountable. I learned this, can't remember exactly, let's call it 25 years ago. Might be a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. When I happened to have the opportunity to play a role in a show, an off-Broadway show of Pippin. By the way, those of you you'll not be surprised. I minored in theater. It's like, oh, totally get it now. Yeah, so I'm. It's abundantly clear what his problem is now. I get the seersucker suit now. He's in costume. You're not far from the truth. But I had a chance to play a role called Pippin. Pippin is one of the best male roles ever written for the Broadway stage. And at the end of the show, Pippin is stripped bare of everything he has, right? And there's nothing left on the stage. And he sings a lyric that, at the time, the 22-year-old, whatever I was, did not understand. I mean, I didn't understand what the heck. I was just singing a lyric because, I was trying to get into character, whatever. But it was a great example of this difference between accountability and freedom, right? And here's the phrase. I'm not a river or a giant bird that soars to the sea. And if I'm never tied to anything, I'll never be free. If I'm never tied to anything, I'll never be free. If I don't choose to be accountable to people, I will actually never be free. Why? Because otherwise I will then just be a slave. I'll just be doing it because because it's imposed on me externally. Because I have to, right? By the way, we talked about the quote earlier from Eric Hoffer, who said society suffers from a lack of impulse to ask new questions. Our biggest problem of self-suffering as human beings is because we don't ask ourselves new questions about ourselves. We just keep asking in our brain the same question over and over again, and we repeat on endless loop the story that we keep telling ourselves. So if we need to be happier, we need to ask a different question, not come up with a new answer. Of course, then this is true also. Sometimes the questions are complicated and the answers are simple. Thank you, Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss did say this. Okay, so that's actually true. I'm going to share with you now, I think, some of the best questions. Got about 20 minutes left. And I'm going to share with you some of the best questions that I have encountered. This is not an exhaustive list. In fact, it changed a little bit, I think, from the slides that you see there. Because I'm always changing this. I'm always, oh, that's a better question. It might be the same. I forget when I submitted these slides. So, but anyway, because there's always new questions. There's always better questions. But let me share with you this one. This is actually one of the best questions you can ask. Would it be appropriate at this time for me to ask you questions? Would it be appropriate at this time for me to ask you questions? I think the mistake that many professionals make is that we immediately move into question mode. We immediately start pounding people with questions. Oh yeah, what are you trying to do? Blah, 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 blah. And we skip the permission question first. We skip this permission question. And as a result, what you see is people dig their heels in. They don't necessarily give you the best answers. They might be playing it close to the vest, right? So they're not going to share with you the intimacy of a better answer. And that can change if you simply just ask permission to ask questions first. I know it sounds like a really minor thing, but in my observation, it makes a big difference. It's one of these leverage points. You know what a lever is, right? The quote to one of the great Greek philosophers, Aeschylus, I think, is, "You give me a lever big enough, I'll move the earth." Right? And this is one of those lever questions, right? I've got a really big lever to ask this question. Is it okay if I ask you some questions? Is now our appropriate time? Right? And this is especially true when someone is asking you one of those how questions that we talked about earlier too early. So, for example, I need a tax return. How much is that going to cost? What's your hourly rate? That would be an example of the question that a prospective customer is asking you. Okay, side note, sidebar article. Because I said it enough times, it's probably really annoying on those of you who came in late that didn't hear, but I prefer the term customer and not client. Here's why. Here's why. My dad part-time taught Latin. Okay? He passed away in November, but he part-time taught Latin. Did you see that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding? See that movie? Okay, you know, there's two running jokes in that movie. There's the Windex joke, right, where he sprays everything with Windex. And then there's the other running joke, which is, give me a word that I'll tell you on the origin is Greek, right? And like, this happens 4 or 5 times in the movie, and they throw a word at it and he makes something up, right? Orange, you know, and he figures out a way to make that Greek. It was sort of like that growing up in my house, except with Latin. Right? My dad would be like, we would talk about Latin words and the roots of them and what they be. And the one that I will always remember sitting around the dinner table is the word mortgage. Mortgage, which is a concatenation of 2 words from Latin. Mort, M-O-R-T, which means death. And gage, which means pledge. A mortgage is a death pledge. You're like, it's crystal clear now, right? It's like, I totally get it, right? It's a death pledge. All right, of course it is. All right. So the word client. Don't worry, I've recovered from many asides. I know I'm not about 4 asides into the story, but don't worry, I can work my way all the way back. All right. So the word client comes from a Latin word meaning one who leans. Back in ancient Rome, all lawyers in ancient Rome had to provide their services for free. There was no such thing as getting paid for being a lawyer. If you needed representation before a court, a Roman lawyer had to provide that with you. And this is both on the plaintiff and the defendant, right? Didn't matter. So there was no such thing. So you had to have this. And only Roman citizens got lawyers. Like the Apostle Paul got a lawyer when he was on trial. Jesus didn't, because he wasn't a Roman citizen, right? This is what it came down to, right? So they had to provide this lawyer, and it was a very patron benefactor. And the word client was one who leans. In other words, they were usually, leaning a little, because most of the people engaged in legal arguments were probably into drinking, whatever, there's a problem. And unless your name was Caligula, you got in trouble for this, right? So they were one who leans, and they needed to be fixed. They needed to be propped back up because they're lean. Now, the word still has that same connotation in social work today, doesn't it? Social workers have clients. Clients. Now, you might say, well, I have clients too. Every year they come to me with the shoebox, proverbially, or now it's like a digital shoebox, whatever that is. And they're leaners, and I got to prop them up every so often. That's what I got to do. Got to fix them. I got to fix them, right? You got to put their head back straight. Got to get them straightened out, right? All right, great. That's an interesting metaphor. Except I want you to begin to start to use the word customer instead. And I know that this falls like really hard on your brain, but customer comes from an Anglo-Saxon word, meaning one whose custom it is, right? It's their custom to engage with you. So they don't come to us when they're leaning. They come to us because it's their custom. Their custom. Their custom. When they're in town, they come into our store. It was their custom. See the difference? It's a proactive relationship versus a reactive relationship. I know those of you are going to say, no, the client means a professional relationship, blah, 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 blah. I want you to begin to think differently. And I think if you, even internally, you start talking to them about customers, it's going to sink in. You're going to start thinking custom, 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 custom. It's got to be their custom. Right? I can't just fix them when they're broken. Because that's the relationships long-term that we want. Not fix when they're broken. Okay? All right. So, can I ask you a few? Is it now not the time to ask you a few questions? Am I past time? I don't think so. Am I past time? No? I got a few minutes left, right? Okay. I just skipped one slide, which is in there. If we have time, we'll come back to it. But I want to make sure that I get to these other questions. Love this question in a business context. What is the crossroads you face at this time? Isn't that a weird word to hear in a business context? Crossroads. Crossroads. What is a crossroads? This is a way better question than what's keeping you awake at night? That's the proverbial question. What's keeping you awake at night? And you'll get what's keeping you awake answers. This have found in my career to be a much better question. What is the crossroads you face at this time? On this journey, I love the significance of the crossroad. We can go down this path, we can go down this path. We need to understand which path is best. I know both might be good, both might be bad. Maybe I need to know which is the lesser of two evils. Maybe I need to know which is the greater of two goods. I don't know. But what is that crossroad that I'm at? Right? And that's a really powerful question I've found to ask people, because it makes them think. When you hear a word out of context, it engages your brain a little bit more. Then what's keeping you awake at night? Because then I can give you the litany of answers that I give at cocktail parties. Right? This changes that up. I alluded to this one earlier because this one works on a personal level, but this is a business level as well. What is the story that you keep telling about the problems you face? The narrative, right? This, my friends, right here, this is the modern version of the campfire. The projector is the modern day campfire. We sit around in conference rooms telling stories and narratives about the past, about what our belief in the future is. But instead of making stick figures against the cave walls, right, we have PowerPoint. Right? So this is the modern day campfire. And what is this story that we keep telling ourselves around this campfire? What is that story? It's not on the slide here, but there are two then questions that you should ask after you talk about that question. What's the story you keep telling yourselves about the problem? The first question after you ask that is, what are the benefits of keeping the story alive? What are the benefits of keeping that story alive? What is it that we do that this story helps? It might motivate other people. There's lots of things that it could be a positive thing, positive influence on the experience of the people in the organization. What is the importance and what are the benefits of keeping the story alive? And then you can probably guess the second question, which I think is kind of a checkmate sucker punch question. What are the costs of keeping the story alive? What does it cost you personally, your firm, your people, your customers, any stakeholder in your business? What is the cost to them of keeping that story alive in your organization? This is a variation on a question I asked earlier. And again, this has to be done in a very safe leadership context. If you have a low trust environment at your organization, don't bring this question home. You're not ready. You got to build trust first. If there's no trust in your partnership, don't ask this question. Unless you want to end the partnership, then it might help. Right? Is that for each of us to say, what is my individual contribution to the thing that I complain about most? What is it that I do that enables the behavior to continue? Because my guess is that there's something. Let me give you a specific example, not necessarily related to accounting, but I see this all of the time in sales organizations that want to implement CRM systems. Here's my number one piece of advice to people who go to implement CRM systems. I would ask this question. Are you willing to fire your best salesperson if they won't use the CRM system? The answer is no, don't implement CRM. don't do it. Don't bother. And I think that same thing is true with any implementation, especially in a partnership model. Are we willing to get rid of a partner who won't implement this idea? Are we willing to do that? And if the answer is no, don't implement the idea at all. Don't even try, because it will just make your situation worse. Right? It's like going on a diet that you know you're going to cheat on. Why bother? Right? The answer to what's the best diet? The one that works for you. The one that you won't cheat on. Right? So if you know that you won't take any action because somebody won't implement this, don't implement it, ever. Because it actually degrades morale. All right, so what is your contribution to the thing that you complain about most? That's a really deep question for people to engage with. Very hard. This is a variation on what I call the mother of all strategic questions, otherwise known as the MOASQ. M-O-A-S-Q, mother of all strategic questions. Previously, about 10 years ago, I thought the mother of all strategic questions was something like this. How much revenue are we going to produce in our strategic time period, and how are we going to do that? So, pick whatever the time period is, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, I don't care what your horizon is for strategy. And how much revenue are we going to produce in that time period? And that was the first question. That was the first question that was asked. And then every part of the conversation after that was, okay, what are the things that we're going to do to achieve that revenue target? Is this sounding familiar to anybody? Okay. What I found, and unfortunately, I think there's anybody in this room that I did strategic consulting with more than 10 years ago. If so, I'm sorry. Because I had the wrong question. 10 years ago, I had the wrong question. But the right question is this, and it's a variation of this. How much value are we going to create in the strategic time period? And how are we going to do that? And I want you to get as granular as you possibly can from a measurement perspective. I want you to figure out how much value, as if you were doing a P&L, as if you were trying to make sure that debits equal credits, right? Be as precise as you possibly can about how much value are you going to create in your future customer's organization, and how are you going to do that? How are you going to create that value? That's the mother of all strategic questions. Why? Because what it does is the conversation then becomes completely external. It focuses outward, outside the organization, which is where results actually happen, right? This is a Peter Drucker thing. Results only exist outside your organization. He learned this, by the way, when he was working with not-for-profits. The result of a school is not an efficiently run school. It's an educated student. The result of a hospital is not an efficiently run hospital. It's a cured patient. The result of an accounting firm is not an efficiently run accounting firm. It's a customer's check that doesn't bounce. Right? That's the result. Results exist outside, not inside. I personally think that P&L should be completely reversed. I think our costs should be one line, and our analysis of how we got revenue and how we created value should be like this. Right? That's what we should be more focused on, because that's where it comes from. Okay, so what is the value that your organization can create for customers? And I want you to get it to a number. Not just some abstract thought about, well, we help them. We improve their situation. No, measure it. Right? How do you help them increase their sales, reduce their costs, pay less taxes, whatever that is? The value's got to be outside the organization. Right? And it's a difficult question. But that will get you, I think, you'll be much better strategic thinker if you ask that question. not a question about revenue. This is my favorite interview question. In fact, if I was interviewing somebody for a job and I was only allowed to ask them one question, this would be the question I would ask. This is a great question to ask around a bar too. You really want to get to know somebody, who are their heroes? And why are they a hero? Now what's fascinating about this question and why I think it's intimately important, two reasons. Oftentimes, not always, but I would say 50% of the time, the answer is usually a family member. My dad, my mom, my sister, my brother, right? When they bring that up in the interview, what are you now allowed to ask questions about? Their relationship with their mom, their dad, their brother, whoever it was. True or false, the best predictive behavior for how you behave inside your company is how people behave at home. If I understand their familiar relationships, I can probably predict how they're going to behave inside my organization today. But it's illegal to ask, so tell me about your mom. Right? Can't ask that. But if you ask who is your heroes and why are they a hero, and they say my mom, have a conversation about their mom. First of all, it's very interesting. They will feel well listened to. And you will get a tremendous amount of insight into how this person behaves in situations. Right? So that's number one. The second reason is really this is just my prejudice, my bias. I have lots of biases, but this is one of them. And I'm sorry if some of you were thinking this when you saw this question. But if somebody tells me, I don't have any heroes, I'm not hiring you. Sorry. It's probably very good, very competent. But I'm not hiring you if you don't have any heroes. What's funny is they usually go this way. I don't have any heroes, but I do have people that I greatly admire. And I'm like, have you looked at the definition of the word hero? Hero is people you greatly admire. That's all it is. It's not saint. It's not in heaven. Right? It's just people you admire. Right? Unless you're going to pick Hitler or Pol Pot, I'm probably going to, you give me a reason, you know? I'll be very flexible. Steve Jobs, probably I wouldn't work for Steve Jobs. He probably was a bastard to work for. But you know what? If he's your hero, at the school. I'm good with that. Right? For what reason? So, who are your heroes and why? So that would be the question that I would ask if I only had one. And here is, I gave you the mother of all strategic questions. This is the mother of all questions. Every question can be traced back to this question. This is the original question. There is no question beyond this question. This is the question that Louis C.K.'s kid didn't ask him. Right? Because this is the ultimate question. This is the question, ready? What is the question that if you had the answer would make you free? You can't answer, it's imponderable, right? You just keep pondering it over and over. What is the question that if you had the answer to that question would make you free?
What do you need?
This is my favorite part. Favorite part. Favorite part. Any questions? We have a couple of minutes, but nobody ever complained about a session ending early, ever. Ever. Just a little tip there, speaking wise. But questions, thoughts, comments? Yes?
Have you ever asked that question and gotten, what are some of the answers you got?
The mother of all questions?
Yeah.
That's a really intimate question, right? I mean, so, and I'll be, so here's mine. If I die, I know I'll go to heaven. If I had that answer, like, okay, yes, you're gonna die and go to heaven, yes. Right? Because then you're totally free, right? I mean, if you believe in heaven. But if you didn't believe in heaven, then you have to come up with a different question. Or some other question. But that's my question. And that's my question today. But that's an example. But I think there are way better questions than that. That's just mine right now.
What if you don't know?
That's good. I mean, it took me a while to even think of that one. Like years, honestly. When I first read The Mother of All Questions, it took me years to come up with a possible answer. I have several possible ones. I shared you one, but that's it. Can't. Yeah.
Oh, you're not supposed to ask a question when somebody asks you a question. How do you respond to that? If you come up with this great question and then someone asks you another question,
Yep.
their response is a question.
Their response is a question to your question,
Yeah.
which often happens,
Yeah.
right? And which often happens. And I probably have to have the specifics of the language, but I would, depending, I might say, well, thank you. Here's my answer to your question. But I'll go answer and then say, okay. But I asked you this, and I'm really interested in this piece of you. So please go back and let's answer.
So kind of like tennis.
Yeah.
Back.
Yeah, I mean, it's a back and forth, but and we call this dialogue, right? There's a balancing between questioning and inquiry, right? And listening, inquiry and listening. So this is the things we're balancing back and forth of. If there are people who just are trying to obfuscate the situation, if that's all they're trying to do, maybe you would say, okay, thanks, but I don't think we need to continue this conversation, right? So.
The last question, the last part.
Yeah.
Will make you free.
Yes.
I have struggled with that.
Good.
My work here is done.
Me too.
In what sense?
What? Good. Yeah. Like, what's free, right? What's free? I don't know. What's free?
Playing Broadway, whatnot.
That's a good question. What's free? Right? That's a good question. What does it mean to be free? I don't know. Discretionary time?
Financial freedom?
Don't feel imposed by anybody else?
Freedom for word.
Yeah. Good stuff. Anybody else? Peace out. That's all I got.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.